Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. Special thanks to Melissa Azam, Judge Tim Bryan, Ubaldo Moraz, and Prithvi Mudana. Hosted by Jeremy Flowers and Nell Spencer.
Welcome back to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. This is episode 11, I think.
Yes.
I am Nell Spencer with the Women's Center of East Texas.
And I'm Jeremy Flowers with the East Texas Crisis Center.
And, I think Jeremy likes to give his title out, and I always forget to give mine. But I'm the Director of Outreach and Education.
And I didn't give mine out purposely this time because you didn't give yours. And I'm the Director of Coordinated Community Response. And this month's June, which means it's Pride Month. So we're going to talk a little bit about the LGBTQIA community and the impact of domestic violence and sexual assault on that specific community and what that looks like.
Yeah. Because domestic violence doesn't just target one population of people. It affects everyone. And I think that it's only fair that everybody gets knowledge and resources, no matter who you are or how you identify.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't discriminate, right? It doesn't discriminate. And, it's important for the community to know that our organizations serve all survivors, right? So anyone affected by intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, we're here to provide services for you. And so from a counseling perspective, what are some ways that may be unique to serving a survivor of the LGBTQIA community that you've identified or you'd want to share with us?
Yeah, I think kind of the two main ones or biggest ones that I have seen is a lack of resources, specifically in our community, right? Because we are in East Texas. And then just there's a fear of identifying who you are to the people around you, so that having a solid support system for people who are LGBTQIA.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things are huge and really important to successful healing and moving forward in your journey for being a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault. And it is something that everybody needs, and this community doesn't necessarily always have readily available for them.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, we know that domestic violence and sexual assault on their own are some of the most underreported crimes. They're some of the most difficult for people to reach out to begin with. So when you add that additional factor of, am I going to be accepted if I reach out for help? Like, is this person going to acknowledge my identity, right? Is this person going to be a safe person for me to fully share what I've experienced? Are they going to affirm my experience, my reality, and what that looks like? It just creates an additional barrier for a survivor.
Yeah. And, trusting, it's not easy to trust a stranger with your trauma, let alone how you identify and who you are as an individual. And so walking into a new situation where you're like, yeah, I've experienced domestic violence or sexual assault. Oh, but also here's this really important thing about me, and I hope you accept that too.
Mm-hmm.
As a counselor, as an advocate, we get to walk alongside people through their journey, and that is so special. And it doesn't matter how you identify. When you walk into our services or our service area, we are going to accept your story and who you are no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I think that can also be a barrier to coming in and receiving services is, how will they treat me?
Mm-hmm. And, we've said it in previous episodes, start by believing, right? And so that doesn't matter who's sharing their story. Mm-hmm. It's like we have to believe that they know their lived experience and they're sharing their truth about their lived experience. And on the flip side, abusers use identity as a way to control, right? Because it's not necessarily safe for someone to come out. They could fear rejection from their family, the community, in general. And so if they've created this bond with this person who has felt safe enough for them to share their identity with, then that person turns out to use that against them. That can be a huge factor in controlling their behavior.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, and I think this goes back to like psychological and emotional abuse, because using something like somebody's identity against them to control them is going to start warping how they view themselves or how they view the outside world and how they view other people. If I believe that, what they're saying to me is nobody's going to love me or nobody's going to accept me or nobody's going to listen to me, nobody's going to believe me, then, and I start to believe that to be true, then the chances of me actually leaving are going to be less and less every day that goes on. And, the emotional and psychological side or mental side of abuse is harder to overcome than the physical abuse or the sexual abuse, if that makes sense. Because we have to literally rewire how we think about ourselves. And if we don't think that society will accept us and or even help us through this, then what are the chances of that person leaving?
Right. And so one of the common myths around, intimate partner violence, domestic violence in the LGBTQIA community is that it doesn't happen as often, right? And so what data tells us is that it actually happens more often. Over 60% of people in the LGBTQIA experience domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. And kind of to your point on the psychological violence, there's another myth that it isn't as serious as physical or sexual violence. And it goes back to, if I'm threatening to out you, what harm is that going to cause you, right? What does that look like?
And depending on how that person has been raised and what their experience was as a child, and again, who their support system is or was, is really going to depend on how serious that threat is to them. Some people who maybe were in a home or in a situation where they got to be who they were and that was accepted, that threat's not going to be as big to somebody who then maybe has kept it secret their whole life and hasn't felt like they would be accepted if they were out.
Yeah, and another myth is that it's easier for people in the LGBTQIA community to leave. And, when you think about what we've been talking about, it's more difficult to speak out. Then how would it be easier for them to leave, right?
Right. And it's, again, you just go back to the basics of domestic violence. Leaving is the most dangerous situation for a survivor anyways, and that's not going to change based on how you identify. That statistic is still that statistic. And so leaving any form of domestic violence relationship is going to be incredibly dangerous, no matter how you identify.
And so I just want to make a disclaimer here, or a note that we are not speaking on behalf of or for the experience of anyone in the LGBTQIA community. If you're listening to this and you're a part of that community, and you want to come talk to us, be on the podcast, we welcome that, so we can get more insight and knowledge into your experience, if you've experienced violence, or insight into what we should do to better support the community, we would love to have you on. And also, we want the community to know that the Women's Center of East Texas and the East Texas Crisis Center are here to support you, whatever that looks like, or whether that's advocacy for hospital advocacy, legal advocacy, job placement, finding housing, if you need emergency shelter, or if you need counseling. Each of our agencies provide all of these services.
Right. Because like I said, domestic violence is all inclusive. And so it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody is welcome, and we are going to serve you to the best of our ability.
Yeah. And so, in addition to the East Texas Crisis Center or the Women's Center, there are resources out there, the National Domestic Violence Hotline,
The Trevor Project.
Trans Lifeline. There are resources available. 988 is a suicide lifeline. But what other things would you want to say to someone that's listening to this right now that might be in the community, or is listening and they have a loved one that's part of that community, to just encourage them to speak out, or to give them encouragement or advice or words of wisdom or anything like that? Is there anything you'd want to add?
I think it's important that we reiterate that the survivor is the expert in their story, and their lived experience is their lived experience. And you can never say like, well, that doesn't matter. That part of your story doesn't matter. Because all of it matters. It affects who we are. It affects how we live our life. It affects how we have relationships with people. And so if maybe a survivor has never been able to have that close relationship with somebody because of how they identify, that's going to affect how they grow up to be an adult and how they enter into relationships. And so I think it's so incredibly important to just remember that people are human. Mm-hmm. And we have to treat everybody as that. Be respectful, be kind, be willing to listen and learn. I think it's so important to learn other people's stories without an agenda. Because if you actually ask questions and you are listening to learn, you're going to realize something different. Maybe you're going to learn something you've never known before. You might have differing views, but you know what? If I love this person and I respect them as a human being, I'm going to learn from that. And so I think it's so important to enter into every relationship without an agenda of, I agree with you, I don't agree with you. Mm-hmm. How about I just learn?
Right. And I think that humanizing aspect is so important. And, we've talked throughout many episodes about trauma-informed care. Mm-hmm. And so trauma-informed care means prioritizing that survivor's experience. So when they come and interact with us, they're a survivor. Right. And so however they identify doesn't impact that, right? Mm-hmm. And so making them feel seen, mm-hmm. heard, believed, mm-hmm. safe, and supported. I think that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And, I don't know what it looks like for you guys at the East Texas Crisis Center, but over the last handful of years, I think when we tell people everybody is welcomed at our shelter, we have seen a higher intake of LGBTQIA individuals coming through our office and into our shelter. And I think that knowledge is so important to say, like, we are here to serve everyone because everyone is important. And so I think part of this is saying we are here for you, we see you, we acknowledge you, and we want to help you.
Yes, and it's just like you said, everyone is important, and also no one deserves violence.
Right.
For any reason, no one deserves violence. And so we're trying to create a violence-free society, and that means for anyone, including violence against the LGBTQ community, who are often discriminated against. And so we just want to emphasize that we are here to support all survivors. Reach out to us. Each of our agencies have 24-hour hotlines. We have trained advocates who specialize in working with survivors. We have licensed therapists who provide trauma-informed counseling. We have emergency shelters. We're here to support you.
We are. And we're here to support your family too. I think that secondary trauma is a huge thing. And so if you were in a home where there was domestic violence, or if you experienced it and you have a child who witnessed it, we want to help those individuals too. And so because part of breaking the cycle is educating everyone and assisting everyone. And so our goal is to break the cycle no matter who you are or where you are. And we want to, if you don't have a support system, if for some reason you don't have a good relationship with your family system or friendships, we will be that for you while you're going through this. Because part of the healing is having that support. And when individuals, and a lot of times people will come in and they have to get rid of all of the people in their life to start over freshly and have healthy relationships. We want to be that for them while they're walking through this journey.
Absolutely. And are there any resources in Longview that, you would recommend to the LGBTQ community?
A lot of resources, I would say us for one. Golly, you put me on the spot. Now I can't remember anything. Give me your resources and then I'll give you mine.
Okay. So, in Tyler, there's the Tyler Area Gays. There's the East Texas Rainbow Network, and the Glass House Resource Center.
Yeah. Jeremy put me on the spot. So give us a call.
Apologies.
We'll give you our resources.
Apologies for that. But it's important for folks to know that there are other resources out there that are specialized in providing services to this community. Yeah. And so, we just hope to raise awareness. That's what we're trying to do with this podcast and educate folks. And we would love to keep this conversation going. It's important for us to normalize this conversation. It's important for the LGBTQIA community to be seen, heard, believed, supported, and know that there's help available if they experience intimate partner domestic violence or sexual assault.
Absolutely. So if you have experienced it, if you know somebody who's experienced it, we are available. We would love for you to contact us, whether you just want to have a conversation with us. Again, we want to learn. We want to listen to learn so that we can best help the people in our community. And so if you or a loved one have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault, you can call the Women's Center at 800-441-5555.
And you can call the Crisis Center at 903-595-5591. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots.